The year is 1933, and in a drafty shed behind the Rolls-Royce works in Derby, an engine explodes. A connecting rod punches through the aluminum crankcase, fragments ricochet off the walls, and the test crew dives for cover. When the smoke clears, the prototype, labelled PV-12, lies silent, oil dripping from the rafters. The report filed that night is merciless. Project unsound. Terminate immediately. But one man refuses to accept that verdict. He isn't a mechanic, not even an engineer. He's a mathematician, Stanley George Hooker, 33 years old, quiet, bespectacled, recently arrived from Cambridge. While most men in Derby dream of cars and money, Hooker dreams of airflow. He spends evenings with calculus notebooks, sketching how pressure moves through curved pipes. At Rolls-Royce, that makes him an oddity, a professor among black-fingered craftsmen. Hooker's first weeks are miserable. The shop foreman barely looks at him. The veteran engineers still worship the retired genius Arthur Rowledge, designer of the failed PV-12. They say Rowledge aimed too high, his engine was too heavy, too fragile, too complicated for its time. But when Hooker wanders through the scrapyard one afternoon, he stops before a wrecked test block bearing that same code, PV-12. The sun catches the curve of the supercharger casing, and something clicks in his mind. He sees not a failure, but an equation that isn't finished. Hooker begins sneaking into the test bays after hours. He measures the impeller blades, traces the air passages with chalk, and calculates losses through every bend and duct. Each number tells the same story. The engine choked on its own breath. Air rushed in but couldn't stay compressed long enough to feed the cylinders. The math says the design can live if the supercharger is rebuilt from the inside out. He brings his notes to Ernest Hives, the stern production manager who runs Derby like a battleship. Hives frowns. "You're a mathematician, not a fitter. What do you know about superchargers?" Hooker replies softly, "Enough to make them work." Against his instincts, Hives gives the young scientist a corner of the lab and one mechanic to assist him. Cyril Lovesey, a wiry test engineer with calloused hands and a suspicious grin. The two men could not be more different. Lovesey trusts touch and instinct. Hooker trusts numbers and flowcharts. But in the humming chaos of the Derby test cells, their worlds collide. Hooker designs a new impeller, each blade curved 3 degrees deeper than before, the inlet reshaped to reduce turbulence. Lovesey machines the parts overnight from scrap magnesium. When they bolt the new compressor onto the battered PV-12 and fire it up, the gauges climb past every previous record. 1,000 horsepower, 1 through 50, 100. The roar shakes dust from the rafters. Mechanics run in from neighboring bays, shouting over the din. For the first time, the PV-12 runs clean, smooth, unstoppable. Hooker stands back, trembling with exhaustion and triumph. That night, in the canteen, Hives lifts his teacup and says, "Gentlemen, we'll call it the Merlin, a small falcon that strikes faster than anything alive. No one knows it yet, but that name will soon echo across every airfield in Britain. The Merlin still isn't ready for war. Its pistons crack under heat, its bearings fail after hours of strain, but the heart of the machine finally beats. Hooker and Lovesey work through the night again and again, pushing for higher boost, cleaner combustion, better breathing. They don't know that only 6 years remain before this engine will decide whether Britain stands or falls. For now, it is just 2 men and a mass of metal, breathing, roaring, alive. And in the glow of the test cell, Hooker whispers to himself, "Airflow is free power. We only have to learn how to let it in." Outside, rain lashes against the factory windows. Europe is sliding toward chaos, Germany rearming, Hitler speaking of destiny. But inside Derby, the future hums, inside a block of aluminum once written off as scrap. The broken engine that couldn't fly has just taken its first breath. Derby, England, 1936. The test sheds never sleep anymore. Steam from cooling water drifts through the rafters, mixing with the blue haze of burnt oil. Somewhere in the noise, A new heartbeat echoes. The first working Merlins turning at full throttle. Stanley Hooker now lives between the mathematics department he left behind and the factory floor he cannot leave. Each day begins with equations and ends with soot on his hands. The war clouds gathering over Europe only sharpen his purpose. Hitler has torn up the Treaty of Versailles. Germany is building new fighters by the month. In Britain, the Air Ministry has ordered 2 prototypes that could decide the next war: the Hawker Hurricane and the Supermarine Spitfire. Both are designed around one thing: a Merlin engine that still refuses to behave. The engine detonates under full boost, swallows fuel unevenly, overheats without warning. Cyril Lovesey calls it a mechanical temper. Hooker calls it a problem of air. Night after night they argue, chalking new airflow diagrams onto the whitewashed walls. Lovesey insists on empirical testing. Hooker insists the math never lies. Between them they forge a rhythm. Science and instinct pounding in sync with the 12 pistons of the V12. By March 1937 they have the first reliable combat-ready version, the Merlin C. It produces 130 horsepower, enough to lift the Hurricane off the runway with astonishing acceleration. Test pilot George Bullman returns grinning, his flight jacket streaked with oil. "She climbs like she's on fire," he says. But Hooker only nods. His eyes are already on the next line of equations. More altitude, less drag, cleaner pressure flow. The Air Ministry approves production. Rolls-Royce turns itself into an arsenal. The car division is pushed aside. The factory becomes a fortress of engines. Women arrive to replace the men drafted into the Territorial Army, their overalls marked RR Girls. The clatter of typewriters and milling machines blends into one industrial symphony. Ernest Hives, once a luxury car manager, becomes the unlikely general of this army of metal. He tells his workers, "The country will need every horsepower we can find." Hooker and Lovesey move to a new department, the experimental test flight at Hucknall Airfield. There, under camouflage nets, they push the Merlin beyond every limit the manuals allow. Higher compression ratios, new propeller drives, new coolant mixtures. Every failure means another explosion, another week lost. Yet each setback teaches them something. They switch from cast iron to aluminum bronze bearings. They reinforce the crankshaft webs. The Merlin's song grows smoother, angrier, more alive. Then, in September 1938, the Munich crisis. While Chamberlain flies to negotiate peace for our time, Rolls-Royce receives urgent telegrams: accelerate production immediately. The team realizes they are no longer perfecting an engine. They are buying time for Britain. Hooker's new supercharger design is ready just as Europe teeters on the edge. The revised impeller delivers 260 horsepower without increasing weight. When test pilot Geoffrey Quill straps into a Spitfire Mk, I fitted with the latest Merlin II, the plane rises from Hucknall like a dart. At full power, it touches 355 miles per hour, faster than any RAF fighter before it. Watching from the ground, Hooker feels the vibration through the soles of his shoes and knows the numbers were right. But success brings no rest. The ministry demands thousands of engines, and fast. The Derby plant expands into satellite factories at Crewe, Glasgow, and Hillington. New apprentices learn by fire, building Merlins under blackout curtains while air raid drills echo in the distance. Hooker hardly leaves the test cells. Lovesey collapses one night from exhaustion and is back at his bench the next morning. "There's no time," he mutters. "The Germans won't wait." In August 1939, 1 week before Hitler invades Poland, the final production model, at the Merlin III, runs flawlessly for 50 hours straight. The readings are perfect. Hives walks into the cell, face pale from the news bulletins, and says quietly, "Gentlemen, you've just given Britain its wings." Hooker looks at the machine, the polished cylinder bank still radiating heat, and realizes how far it has come. From a scrapyard carcass to the heart of every fighter in the nation's defense. Outside, air raid sirens test their speakers for the first time. Inside, the Merlin keeps purring, steady and patient, as if waiting for the storm. The men who refuse to give up have built more than an engine. They've built a promise that when the darkness comes, Britain will not face it unarmed. And the darkness is only days away. Summer 1940. Britain stands alone. France has fallen, and across the Channel the German Luftwaffe masses for invasion. Every morning the sirens rise over southern England, the sound of engines and courage colliding in the same sky. In Derby, the Rolls-Royce test bays never go silent. Mechanics sleep on benches beside half-assembled Merlins. Stanley Hooker hasn't had a full night's rest in months. His notebooks are stained with oil and tea, every margin filled with equations. The factory feels less like a workshop and more like a front line. They aren't building engines anymore, they're building survival. At the Air Fighting Development Unit in Duxford, pilots discover the Merlin's limits the hard way. At high altitude, the carburetor floods, the engine coughs and dies in a turn. German Messerschmitt Bf 109S use direct fuel injection and can dive straight down. British fighters can't. Their engines stall under -G. Hooker studies the reports and snaps his pencil in frustration. "We gave them wings," he mutters, "but not lungs." He experiments with pressure valves and flow regulators, searching for a way to keep the Merlin breathing upside down. Meanwhile, Beatrice Schilling, an engineer from Farnborough, invents a tiny brass restrictor, the RAE orifice, a simple washer that limits fuel surge. When Hooker sees it, he laughs out loud. "That little ring," he says, "will save more pilots than any of us." Within weeks, every Spitfire and Hurricane in Fighter Command carries Schilling's device, and the Merlin stops choking in combat. July 10th, the Battle of Britain begins. From the grass fields of Biggin Hill, Tangmere and North Weald, hundreds of Hurricanes and Spitfires claw into the morning haze, their 12-cylinder hearts howling. Each one is a Rolls-Royce Merlin III turning at nearly $3,000 RPM, delivering more than 1,000 horsepower. Hooker drives to the Derby roof during raids, staring south where vapor trails cross like white scars. He listens, counts seconds between the rumble and the sirens. To him, every returning plane is proof that the math was right. Inside the control rooms, the new engines earn a reputation of their own. Pilots write in their diaries, "The Merlin never quits. She screams, she shakes, but she brings you home." When squadron leader Douglas Bader, flying his Spitfire Mugwar, loses his canopy in combat, his engine still pulls him clear of danger. Hooker keeps the newspaper clipping in his desk, but the cost is brutal. Each week the factory receives trucks loaded with burned engines. The metal is twisted, the smell unmistakable, aviation fuel and defeat. Hooker refuses to discard them. He walks among the wrecks, prying out pistons, studying fractures, learning what failed. "Every broken Merlin teaches us something," he tells Lovesey. "If we listen hard enough, it's still talking." They respond with relentless improvements, stronger pistons from RR50 alloy, better coolant pumps, a revised supercharger gear ratio. In September, the Merlin Dexteagle prototype begins tests. With a two-stage supercharger, it pushes 1,300 horsepower at altitude. The pilots call it the climb to heaven. For the first time, Spitfires can meet the 109s head-on and rise above them. On 15th of September 1940, the battle reaches its peak. More than 1,500 aircraft fight above London. Civilians crowd rooftops as the sky roars with explosions and contrails. Hooker listens from Derby, the drone so deep it vibrates in his chest. By evening, the radio crackles, "Enemy defeated, heavy losses inflicted." The Luftwaffe withdraws. Operation Sea Lion, Hitler's invasion plan, is cancelled. Churchill calls it their finest hour. But for Hooker and the men of Rolls-Royce, it feels like something quieter. a breath finally released. The Merlin has not only kept the RAF in the air, it has kept Britain free. When the bombing raids on Derby begin that autumn, Hives orders the test cells moved underground. Hooker refuses to leave. He continues running engines through the night, using blackout lamps and blankets over the gauges. In one diary entry, he writes, "While these engines run, this island lives." By the winter of 1941, victory in the air seems possible. But new telegrams arrive from the ministry. Britain doesn't just need defence anymore, it needs offence. Bombers that can strike Berlin, fighters that can escort them, and engines that can do the work of two. Hooker folds the paper, sets it beside his calculator, and whispers, "Then we'll make the air itself fight for us." He doesn't yet know that his next experiment, a double supercharged Merlin, born from wreckage and scrap, will power a wooden aircraft faster than any fighter in the sky. The engine that saved Britain is about to become the one that changes air warfare forever. Early 1942. The war has shifted east. Britain no longer fights for survival, it fights to strike back. Yet the bombers that carry its fury move too slowly. The Wellingtons and Stirlings crawl across Europe like lumbering giants, easy prey for the night fighters of the Luftwaffe. Every raid means more names for the casualty lists. What Britain needs is a new kind of machine, one that can outrun death itself. At Rolls-Royce, Stanley Hooker studies the message from the Air Ministry with tired eyes. Increase altitude performance, double the power if possible. He writes beneath it a single word, possible. Hooker's notebooks fill with equations for a two-stage, two-speed supercharger, a system that will feed the Merlin air twice, compressing it, cooling it, and sending it roaring into the cylinders. He calculates the pressures by hand, knowing each wrong digit means a shattered block. The design demands new alloys, tighter tolerances, more precise machining than Derby has ever achieved. The others say it can't be built in wartime. Hooker answers, "Then we'll build it in pieces." They begin scavenging. Damaged Merlins from crashed Spitfires arrive by the truckload. Lovesey's crew strip them down for usable parts, connecting rods here, crankshafts there, and reassemble the best into a single experimental engine. They mount it on a dynamometer in the corner test cell and wait for Hooker's signal. When he nods, the switch flips. The motor coughs, sputters, then unleashes a scream that rattles windows across Derby. 2,000 horsepower. The walls tremble. Oil sprays from the breather. No one speaks, they just watch the needles climb. The Merlin 61 is alive. News of the miracle spreads fast. At the de Havilland Works in Hatfield, designer Ronald Bishop listens with fascination. He and Geoffrey de Havilland Jr. are finishing a radical aircraft, the DH-98 Mosquito, built almost entirely of birch and balsa wood to save scarce metal. Light, unarmoured, it relies purely on speed. With ordinary engines, it's impressive. With Hooker's twin supercharged Merlins, it could be untouchable. In February 1942, the first Mosquito B MKM fitted with Merlin 61's rolls from the hangar. Its smooth wooden skin glows under the floodlights. Hooker is there, coat collar pulled high, watching mechanics tighten the last bolts. He has seen hundreds of test flights, but this one makes his pulse quicken. The pilot, Geoffrey de Havilland Jr., opens the throttle. The twin Merlins howl together, two perfect heartbeats in unison, and the wooden aircraft surges forward like a living thing. Moments later, it vanishes into cloud. At 25,000 feet, it reaches 392 miles per hour, faster than any bomber or fighter now in service. When it lands, the pilot laughs, shouting above the cooling engines. She outruns the Spitfire that escorts her. Hooker allows himself a rare smile. The numbers had been right again. Within months, the Mosquito becomes a legend. It bombs Gestapo headquarters in Oslo, shatters radio stations in Berlin, photographs submarine pens in daylight, and escapes before German fighters can climb. Its wooden fuselage absorbs radar, its Merlins sing above the flak. The Luftwaffe gives it a name filled with grudging awe, Der Holzgeist, the wooden ghost. The Merlin 61 also finds another home, inside the new Spitfire Mustang. Britain's answer to the German Focke-Wulf FW-190. Hooker's two-stage supercharger allows the Spitfire to fight above 35,000 feet, turning the tide once more. Every victory report that crosses his desk carries the same signature. Power, Merlin, 61 or later. The Derby plant becomes a cathedral of engines. Women in scarves assemble cylinder heads by hand. New workers arrive from all over the Commonwealth. They work under blackout curtains while German bombers hunt the Midlands. During one raid, shrapnel slices through the roof of Hooker's office and embeds in his drafting table. He keeps it there as a reminder. Precision amid chaos. By late 1943, the Merlin has multiplied into more than 100 variations, each one an evolution of the scrap Hooker once rescued from a yard. The Americans request blueprints for license production at Packard in Detroit. Soon, Packard built Merlin's Thunder in the P-51 Mustang, giving the Allies long-range reach to Berlin and back. Hooker reads the test results with disbelief. 437 mph at 25,000 feet. The Mustang and Mosquito, both carrying his engine's voice, now rule the skies. And yet, for Hooker, triumph feels strangely hollow. He walks through the Derby test halls at midnight, the air thick with burnt fuel, and whispers, "It's never perfect." Each new record only reveals another imperfection to solve. He knows the future is already moving beyond pistons, toward turbines and jets, but he can't abandon the sound of the Merlin. It has become part of him, a symphony of mathematics turned to thunder. The newspapers call it the engine that won the war. Hooker flinches when he hears it. He knows it isn't true. Engines don't win wars. People do. The mechanics who worked by candlelight, the pilots who trusted his equations at 20,000 feet, the women who filed valves until their hands bled. They're the real miracle. Still, when he stands beside a returning Mosquito, its wooden skin peppered with holes, the engines ticking as they cool, he places a gloved hand on the cowling and feels the slow heartbeat fade. It began as junk, he thinks, and now it's faster than fear. May 1945, victory bells echo through Derby. Factories open their doors and the workers pour into the streets, grease-stained overalls and all. Britain has survived, and the war that consumed 6 years and millions of lives is finally over. Inside the test cell, Stanley Hooker stays behind. One last Merlin runs on the stand, throttled down until it idles like a heartbeat. He listens to it tick and fade, each metallic ping marking the end of an era. This sound had filled his world since 1933. Now it is being replaced by silence. He is 45, worn thin by years of strain. His colleagues, Cyril Lovesey and Ernest Hives, celebrate outside, but Hooker just stands there with a rag in his hand. The war has been won, yet he feels only the weight of what it cost. Every successful engine had also meant another bombing raid, another German factory burning, another crew that might never return. The Merlin had saved Britain and destroyed half of Europe. When Rolls-Royce management offers him a new assignment, he accepts without hesitation. The future, they say, lies in jet propulsion. Hooker joins a small experimental group working with Frank Whittle's early turbine designs at Barnoldswick. The smell of oil and metal is the same, but the rhythm has changed. There are no pistons, no explosions, just the endless scream of compressed air. Hooker studies it with the same fascination he once gave to superchargers. He realizes he's still chasing the same dream, to make air itself a source of power. In the years that follow, he transforms Britain's post-war jet industry. He designs the Derwent 5 that propels the Gloucester Meteor, and later the Avon engine that powers the English Electric Canberra and the first Comet jet airliner. He leaves Rolls-Royce in the 1950s, then returns 20 years later to rescue the company again after a financial collapse, still solving problems with pencil, slide rule, and faith. Yet when journalists ask about his proudest achievement, Hooker never mentions the jets. He talks about the Merlin, the scrap of aluminum and math that once kept a nation alive. We learned, he says, that air, if you treat it kindly, will do impossible things for you. He keeps one souvenir on his desk, a bent impeller blade from the original PV-12, the engine that nearly killed a test crew in 1933. Its edges are scored and blackened, a relic of failure turned foundation of triumph. Visitors often ask why he doesn't polish it. Hooker smiles, "Because it reminds me what perfection costs." In 1984, Sir Stanley Hooker dies at the age of 80. On that day, a restored Spitfire Mustang takes off from Duxford for a memorial flypast. The twin Merlins of a Mosquito accompany it, their synchronized roar rolling across the airfield. For a few minutes, the sky above England sounds exactly as it did in 1940, raw, defiant, alive. The crowd looks up. Mechanics wipe their hands on old rags. And somewhere, perhaps, the quiet mathematician who once found beauty in the way air curves through a pipe is smiling again. Because he proved that even in the darkest war, intelligence and persistence could turn scrap into salvation.
He didn't just build engines.
He taught machines how to breathe.